some of that members video. Just be like, the rest of it will be posted after this live stream. Is there a way?
We didn't play it over the computer itself. Yeah.
There's
Yeah. Like off my editing program.
Don't have a pen. You have a pen, do you?
You go out to the lobby.
Just sent you a screenshot of the call-in number. So. Zoom in. Hey there, Jordan Sheridan. High technology and production always coming from Status Coup. We are live from South Bend, Indiana. I've spilled water all over the room, and we're doing 25 things at once. Jamal Jones behind the camera. You'll meet him in a few minutes. We are, what time is it? 6 minutes before a call that the local chapter of Black Lives Matter is doing with media here. I actually asked them for permission if I can air the call so that you could hear the call. They said yes. So, Jen, kudos to you for making sure I asked for permission. I just assumed. So We're going to air that call, and why it's important. Obviously, the debate is today. The sixth debate. Pete Buttigieg is currently, according to the polls, leading in Iowa. New Hampshire leading or second. You know, Status Coup reports all the time. Take these polls with a grain of salt. But the bottom line is the media has essentially invented this man into a leading candidate for the Democratic nomination. So we decided we need to come to South Bend because from what I've researched, from what I've heard, there's not a lot of there other than gentrification, disrespect, neglect, abandonment, demolition of the black community. And literally, in less than 24 hours, we saw it with our own eyes. So in 4 minutes, because this call is coming in 4 minutes, I'm going to briefly describe. We'll talk about it after the call, too. Remember, smash that like button. Some people are like, Jordan, stop begging for likes. Do me a favor, F off. I've had enough of people, and they're stop begging for likes, stop begging for money. We're being suppressed on YouTube. If you don't press the like button, the algorithm keeps us down. So the more people that press like, the more people that see the live stream. I'm sorry if that upsets your snowflake sensibilities. Putting that aside, last night, after we did an interview that's now up on the channel, I get a text message. Actually, I got a text message during the interview. Hey, the South Bend Police Department just arrested a black male and were caught on audio, on tape, basically reenacting a scene from the Quentin Tarantino film, Django Unchained. If you've never seen the film, it's one of Quentin Tarantino's, Western bloodbaths, a lot of blood, a lot of shooting, but it's about, it's a civil war. I wouldn't call it a thriller, but basically Jamie Foxx plays Django, and in the movie there's a scene where the KKK is marching to lynch him, and they're kind of bickering amongst themselves because one of the wives, the hoods that they made didn't quite fit the Klansmen. Literally, you have South Bend police officers joking about that while arresting this black man. The black man was live streaming his arrest. The officers turned around the phone thinking that would end it. It turned the screen black, but it actually kept the audio running. So we heard this, and then I spent, I don't know, Jamal, what would you say, an hour, 2 hours, writing the story because it wasn't the easiest thing to hear the audio. Then the police department is sending out, I think, misinformation. Oh, it wasn't South Bend Police Department. Well, witnesses only saw South Bend Police Department cars. 2 minutes. Only saw South Bend Police Department cars, and then I got the police report. The arresting officer was South Bend Police, and the agency listed on the police report is South Bend Police. I can't identify who the officers were in the audio, but I can say it was South Bend Police. Who's the mayor of South Bend, Jamal?
Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg. So I reached out to the Buttigieg campaign. I think they're thanking their lucky stars that we broke this story as Donald Trump was impeached in the House of Representatives. They have not responded. The South Bend Police Department has not responded. So I think that they are assuming this will go quietly into the night. But obviously, Pete Buttigieg didn't make the comments, but Pete Buttigieg and the South Bend Police Department, it's been a big issue in the campaign. There's been a lot of talk about issues with the black community. There was a very, very controversial shooting here where Eric Logan, a 54-year-old black male, was shot and killed by a white police officer whose body camera was turned off. There's also been talk, a lot of controversy about police tapes where recordings might have had some racial comments about the black police chief. Those have not been released. Lot of questions, shall we say, about Pete Buttigieg and his relationship with the black community and his police department. They're not answering Status Coup. The South Bend Police Department is not answering to this arrest yesterday. So the Black Lives Matter is now having a call in 1 minute. They're going to have reporters and civil rights leaders on the call. I don't know if they're going to address our exclusive report. If you haven't seen the report, go to statuscoup.com. It's right there. Shockingly, right after we reported the story and published it, our website got taken down, which, Jen, I don't believe has ever happened. So we rushed it to put it on Medium. Now our website is back up. So let's call into this phone call. Let's call in. It's not the highest tech, but we're going to have you hear the call with Black Lives Matter leaders. They will be speaking about the true Pete Buttigieg. I believe they might touch on our report from last night. So we're going to call. Bear with us. If you missed it, I do have their permission to air the call. So we're going to call in now, let you hear that, and then we'll talk after the phone call. Give us 1 minute to do that. Got the number?
Thank you for calling. Please have your conference ID ready, and a coordinator will be with you momentarily. If you require assistance during your program, please press *0, and a coordinator will assist you.
All right. I think we're just waiting. So hang tight, folks. Hang tight for 1 minute.
Calling, may I have a conference ID?
Yeah, I don't have a conference ID in the email.
Okay, what is the title of the conference?
The title, I'll give you a minute. South Bend Black Lives Matter media call.
All right, thank you. Can I have your last name with the spelling?
Chariton, Chariton.
Your first name?
Jordan, Jordan.
And your company name?
Status Coup, COUP.
You said first word was status?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll get you placed in.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
While we're waiting to get patched in, I just want to say, so essentially our story that we broke yesterday, we broke that on the same day that the South Bend Police Department came out that they had approved new policies for body cameras. Body cameras have been a really controversial topic here because, like I said, the police officer who had shot and killed Eric Logan had his body camera off. So the South Bend Police Department yesterday announced they had a new body camera policy had been approved. When reporters asked Mayor Buttigieg's...
Stand by, your program is about to begin. If you need assistance during your conference today, please press *0.
Mayor Buttigieg, when his...
Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's South Bend
Here we go.
Black Lives Matter media call. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Later, you will have the opportunity to ask questions during the question and answer session.
You can register to ask a question at any time by pressing the star and 1 on your touch-tone phone. I will be standing by should you need any assistance. It is now my pleasure to turn today's conference over to Jordan Geiger with Black Lives Matter. Please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. This is Jordan Geiger. I'm a leader with Black Lives Matter South Bend. I do want to thank you for joining our call today to discuss systemic racism and secrecy within the South Bend Police Department under Mayor Buttigieg. We know that many people are just beginning to learn about South Bend under Mayor Buttigieg. Many people are not yet aware of the legal powder keg ready to explode in 2020 with court cases and investigations related to secret tapes, police shootings, and racism in the South Bend Police Department under Mayor Pete. Our goal for the call today is to fill you in on where things have been and where things are going in 2020, especially before tonight's presidential debate. Before hearing from some community voices, we wanted to get some basic facts on the table. We've invited a special guest named Jonathan Larson to speak with us today. If you don't know, he is an investigative journalist who is not here to share opinions, but rather to brief you on some of his original investigative reporting for TYT Investigates that has broken new ground. His stories have also touched on how police sought to use Buttigieg donors to get him to fire the black police chief, Darrell Boykin. Numerous stories about the secret tapes, contradictions in various people's depositions, and more. His reporting has been cited as original sourcing in official legal documents, and we're thrilled that he could join us today. Then after Larson, we'll hear from our newly elected councilman, Henry Davis. He's a 2-term councilman who's about to be seated for his 3rd term. And also my fellow leader of Black Lives Matter South Bend, Kat Reddy. So they will both share some more facts, get those on the table, and tell us about how events here locally has impacted our community. Then we'll hear from Brian Kaufman, the lawyer for the family of Eric Logan, who was shot earlier this year. Reporters will want to stay tuned for this because we'll be discussing the ongoing flow of new information that will go public in 2020 from the federal civil rights suit filed by his clients against South Bend under Mayor Pete. And finally, we'll hear from Dr. Melina Abdullah from the National Black Lives Matter, and she will share her perspective on her conversation with Mayor Pete several months ago. Also, what nationally black voters are thinking about Pete and his record, and also our expectations for debate moderators tonight. The spelling, titles, and Twitter handles of all speakers on this call are in the invitation to this email. At any time during this call, you can push star 1 to enter the line to ask questions. This call is being recorded. If you are on a recording of this call or have any questions afterwards, please email us at blm.southbend@gmail.com. So first up, let's hear about some of the facts so far. Jonathan Larson from TYT Investigates. 2 questions for you to answer in your initial 2 to 3 minutes. The first is, what's the 30,000-foot overview of the issues your reporting has delved into? And what are some of the loose threads, ticking time bombs, or other pending questions that you are paying attention to that the entire nation should pay attention to as well?
Thank you, Jordan. You made very clear that I'm not endorsing or anything like that. I just want to make sure folks understand that if you know TYT as an opinion outlet, I was brought in a couple years ago to create a separate, straight-up journalistic division, which is TYT Investigate. So that's what I do. So thank you for making that clear, Jordan, about this not being an endorsement or anything like that. So I'm a little bit hesitant to characterize everything from an overview point of view, but I will say that I first went to South Bend back in April, and since then we've come up with a number of documents that Pete Buttigieg and or the city or the campaign have had or had access to that we've revealed over the last however many months it is. And in terms of what's coming up next, one of the first things we revealed was that the county clerk had destroyed Buttigieg's 2011 campaign finance filings, which is perfectly legal according to state record retention laws. We found one of them on our own and reported on that. but there are other filings out there that the Buttigieg campaign still has not acknowledged whether or not he even has them, let alone whether he'll release them. In terms of legal proceedings going forward, the Brian Kaufman, who's also on the call, can talk about this a little bit more, but that lawsuit touches on, or could potentially touch on, a lot of the things that we've reported. We reported, I think, in June or so, maybe that's a little earlier, that, for instance, a black woman named Stephanie Jones asked Pete Buttigieg to reopen the case of the hanging death of her son, a 16-year-old black boy who was found hanged just outside South Bend. The case was immediately ruled a suicide without any kind of forensic exam of the body or the scene, no autopsy, no investigation. She went to a meeting of the Common Council, we know because it's in the minutes, and told her story. Buttigieg was there. She told us she asked him personally for help afterwards. He said, call my office. She says she did, and they never put her through, and he never called back. And it turns out that the coroner, she didn't know this at the time, but the coroner who had declared it a suicide, Buttigieg had just named that person to be his interim chief of police after demoting Darrell Boykins. That was one story we did. Another was a case that was a very big deal for the black community in South Bend, but I haven't really seen it addressed in any international reporting, although I haven't seen all of it. But this was the case of Ron Teachman, the first permanent appointee of Buttigieg to run the police department. He was accused, not long after showing up, of failing to back up a black lieutenant during an altercation where there was a presence of a gun reported. There was a secret Indiana State Police report done on the incident, which Buttigieg had and refused to release, and essentially characterized it as exonerating the chief. The president of the Board of Public Safety, who also saw the report, resigned and said Buttigieg was lying. To us, I mean. We got a copy of, we were leaked a copy of an excerpt of the report, which included a summary, and it, as we reported, it does contradict the way Buttigieg characterized the report at the time, and potentially more troubling, it specifies that, it reveals very explicitly that investigators were looking at whether the chief tried to intimidate the black lieutenant into changing his story, none of which was apparently dealt with in any way. And of course, the contrast was with Darrell Boykins, who Buttigieg said, you know, if you bring a federal investigation onto my department, onto your department, you can't be part of my leadership team. The juxtaposition with the state investigation of his white chief was, I think, especially troubling for some people. And as you mentioned, we found or got access to legal documents that the city has had for years revealing that although Buttigieg said he didn't know if he could legally even ask what's on the tapes, his lawyers did just that, asking the woman who made the tapes and heard what was on them. They asked her 15 questions specifically about what was on the tapes, and they got answers years ago. And as you mentioned, some of those answers included police talking about using donors, two donors of Pete Buttigieg's. Both of them denied it to me, but the police in these documents are said to have discussed using the donors to get Buttigieg to get rid of the black chief. In June 2011, a police officer is quoted as saying that Buttigieg had agreed that once he got in office, Buttigieg would be gone. And the officers, by the way, I should note, not by the way, but were also quoted, one of them was quoted as saying it's going to be a fun time when all white people are in charge at the department. And obviously, the fact that Boykins was gone as of the end of March 2012, and the diversity of the department got worse in the subsequent years, that's a pattern that I'm not in South Bend and I'm not of the black community, but that's been of some concern, I think it's fair to say, to the black community in South Bend.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. I really appreciate that overview. Now I want to turn things over to Henry Davis Jr. I want to have him talk about how these actions have impacted the community. So we're honored to be joined by him. Henry, in your initial 2 minutes, what do all of these facts about racism and diversity in the police department say the style of governing in our city? And what should people know about the type of presence?
Hey, you know what? You're going to have to say that again because the phone broke up a little bit, and so I caught a little bit of it.
Okay, yeah, no problem. I'm sorry. All right, so Henry, could you say, what do all of these facts about racism and secrecy in the police department say about Pete Buttigieg's style of government in our city? And what should people know about the president he might be if he were to assume office?
Well, I first want to, thank everybody for joining the call. I think it's awesome that, you all took an interest in, hearing our side of the story, which is reality, the reality we live in South Bend. To answer Jordan's initial question, I think, the biggest indicator for future behavior or even expectations of people's behavior is obviously their past. Doesn't mean that no one changes, but we're dealing with someone who was only held an elected office for 7 years. This is the 8th year. And since he's became mayor, there has just been one thing after another. And so when you're talking about racism, I think it speaks for itself. I don't think that, I could add a lot more color to electrify his record. Again, we have the lowest number of serving of African Americans in the police department ever. We've had 2 African American men die, whether it was in police custody or even being shot and killed by police. That has not been taken care of. African Americans have received the lowest amount of contracts ever in the history of the city, next to zero. And there's been over $1 billion spent for public works projects, for construction, etc. Vendors perhaps as well. Our housing stock is being demolished, and there is no program to help replace it with affordable housing. The kids that are going to school in black and brown areas are facing an idea of not being able to have the schools in their neighborhoods anymore, meaning that they're either going to be bussed out or have to go to the charter school system, which has been replaced by the public they're being replaced by the public school system. Excuse me. The public school system is being replaced by a charter school system. I'm sorry. And on top of that, there is nothing from the public side, meaning the leadership of the Buttigieg administration, including himself, has spoken up and against, the charter schools taking over our area because there are a hurt to our tax base. So I can go on for days, about what has taken place and what has occurred. Which has not been a good thing for people of color in the city of South Bend, and especially black people.
All right, well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate that. I know you've served with Mayor T as a councilman, and so you have a real first-hand perspective really on his record. And now for more perspective on the impact in the community, I do want to go over to Kat Redding. She's a leader with me at Black Lives Matter South Bend. Kat, in your 2 minutes, what should voters nationally know about what local black residents of South Bend are facing every day under Pete Buttigieg's administration?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Jordan. Well, I'd like to start off on the front things. BLM will definitely continue to press our incoming mayor for cultural competencies as well as implicit bias training. We also will be pushing for the Civilian Review Board with subpoena power for the South Bend Police Department. Also, we will be asking for the resignation of Chief Roskowski still. Just to catch everyone up to speed, on Father's Day, June 16th, Eric Logan was murdered at the hands of Sergeant O'Neill. This death of Eric Logan sparked outrage in the community. Behind the death of Eric Logan, BLM chapter Melina Abdul flew in to help assemble in the community. So just to overlook, July 14th, BLM marched for solidarity in the community as well as police reform. On August the 4th, BLM held a 24-hour standoff at the county city building while feeding the homeless and all of the people that were in attendance. BLM also has facilitated and attended a series of 8 advisory meetings. We review policies of the police and their practices. The purpose of the meeting was to solicit input from the residents of South Bend. Yesterday, at the Public Board of Safety meeting, we learned that the Public Board of Safety rendered some updates to policies, which were that the sergeants will be doing random inspections of footage updates. The samples of the footage are 15 minutes from each subordinate. Inspections will be 3 or 4 times a year. Sergeants will check each disciplinarian, sending all findings up the chain of command. And I just want to put on the record that we are not satisfied with the implementations of the policy. There was 8 advisory meetings, and this was the best that they could do. We are not happy with it. This is just merely a drop in the bucket compared to the damage that has been done here in the city. We will continue to fight. It's our duty, and we have nothing to lose but our change. So the community will still continue to push for a civilian review board, as well as the review board with subpoena power. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much, Kat. And I'm thankful for your work. We've worked very closely together since the death of Eric Logan. We're also thankful for the work of Brian Kaufman. So he's the attorney for the family of Eric Logan, which currently has a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city of South Bend. Brian, in about 2 minutes, we'd love to hear you share about what's next for the lawsuit. Some people have talked about the ticking time bombs that will explode legally in 2020, and you're right in the middle of that. Can you share how you are thinking about the depositions, hearings, and court dates in 2020, and what kind of information reporters can expect to be made public?
Thank you, Jordan, for the introduction, and again, thank you for inviting me to this call today. Just to kind of give you a broad overview to start with, we are involved in this matter. The Logan family has retained my law firm to pursue a civil rights claim against not only the officer involved in the shooting, but also against the city of South Bend. And those claims are, one, a violation of Mr. Logan's civil rights, taking his life when we don't believe that the force that was used in this case was necessary, and we believe it was very excessive. And the second one, which has kind of snowballed and picking up speed, is what lawyers like to call a Monell claim. We believe that there is a pattern and practice in the city of South Bend that has led potentially to this shooting and other bad incidents by bad actors. And that goes all the way up the chain, from chiefs of police to the mayor of South Bend not taking responsibility for either training officers, policies that are in place that violate people's civil rights, and also discipline with these actors. And we believe that what is going to be coming down the road, our lawsuit that we filed back in early July of this year, is starting to pick up speed and steam. We are very, very early on in discovery. We have not taken any depositions. We have not received any discovery yet. However, some of you that are on the call know about the numerous subpoenas that we have sent out in the case to gather information. We have sent subpoenas to the Democratic National Committee. We've also sent subpoenas to the mayor of South Bend, but as Mr. Buttigieg as a person, not as the mayor of South Bend. We believe that any communications that he has had while on the campaign trail
is as a U.S. citizen, and he does not have the right to claim any type of executive privilege as the mayor. If there are discussions about the Eric Logan shooting or the potential cover-up after the fact, we believe we have a right to that information, and we are going to seek that in our federal civil rights case that is pending in South Bend, Indiana. What is going to be coming down the pipeline in 2020 is that we are going to be taking numerous depositions. We will be taking depositions of the officer involved, any other officers who are on the scene. We also most likely will be deposing or be sending a subpoena to take a deposition of the mayor of South Bend as well, and his dealings with not only this case, but also which has been happily known as the Boykins tapes, which we believe would help prove any type of policy and practice or a Monell claim that we have pending against the city of South Bend. With that said, I will thank you again, Jordan, for the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing around the case and in helping the family. Finally, I just want to introduce Dr. Melina Abdullah. She's a professor of Pan-African Studies at California State University and also a national Black Lives Matter leader who has spoken with the mayor on the phone with us. She's also attended community meetings in South Bend, and she's currently based in Los Angeles, home of today's Democratic presidential debate. Melina, in about 2 minutes, can you talk about how Black voters nationally are seeing Mayor Pete and the questions he needs to answer about racism among the South Bend police? And also, lastly, what are your expectations for debate moderators in tonight's presidential debate?
Sure. Thank you, Jordan, and thank you, everybody, for convening this call and for being on the call. As someone who resides in Los Angeles, South Bend isn't generally at the top of my agenda of places to watch. But as Mayor Pete began to pick up steam in the presidential election, Democratic nomination, it was important that we began to watch what was happening, and we're thankful to Black Lives Matter South Bend for reaching out to the global network and to me personally to talk about the challenges that the Black community has had with Mayor Pete, the long history of what we really consider to be anti-Blackness under his mayoralty. So it's really important that we understand, as a previous speaker said, that the best predictor of future action is past action. And so if we look at the way that Mayor Pete has treated the Black community in South Bend, it's troubling to say the least as we move forward in considering him as a possible president for the entire country. And so what we're seeing is Mayor Pete being presented by national media as an alternative to the kind of blatant white supremacy that we see coming from the current administration. However, as one who studies Black politics and has been studying Black politics for the last 25 years, it's important to understand that when we talk about white supremacist political agendas, that they come in a range of forms, and one of them is absolutely liberal white supremacy. Liberal white supremacy being the kind of white supremacy that spews inclusive rhetoric and talks in the language of multiculturalism and diversity, but when you look at the actual policies implemented and the outcomes achieved, you see the oppression of people of color, and namely and most specifically Black people, and that's what we see happening under Mayor Pete's leadership in South Bend. And so it's important that we understand what's happening and that we kind of unpack this brand of another brand of kind of more palatable racism that we see happening here. I think that it's also come to the fore, not just with what Mayor Pete has been doing in South Bend, but with his campaign overall. So I'm often asked, as we've been talking about Mayor Pete with some degree of regularity, what it is we have against him. We don't have anything against him personally. What we have something against is the idea of a continuing practice of what we see as Black oppression. And so we've heard, I think, a lot about what happened in South Bend, but also when we think about the way that his campaign has run, the idea of equating his identity as a gay white man with black people, so he can relate to anti-blackness because he's a gay man. That is insulting and problematic. The use of the Douglas Plan and the claim that 400 black leaders in South Carolina signed on to the so-called Douglas Plan that was developed, to my understanding, with no input of black South Benders, right? So this Douglas Plan for Black America, which in many ways parallels the so-called plan that Donald Trump had for Black America when he was running 4 years ago, with no input of real black leaders, right? This Douglas Plan was supposedly signed off on by 400 black leaders in South Carolina, and we find out that 40% of them weren't black, and many of them weren't consulted for their sign-off. The remaining 60% weren't consulted for their sign-off. The use of stock photos of a Kenyan woman and her brother, and then claiming that it was an African-American woman and her son, right? All of those kinds of things are hugely problematic, and many of them are detailed in a recent Washington Post report that you can look up. But I think finally the most important thing that we see as we talk about Mayor Pete's run for president is his unwillingness to engage what we see as his black problem. He has a problem with Black America, and rather than really sincerely and deeply addressing the national black community, he is kind of blaming black people for not supporting him. So you saw him recently say that the lack of black support has more to do with black people's homophobia than his record of racism. I think that's a huge problem, and I hope that that's something that moderators tonight will lift up. I know Yamiche Alcindor has been one who has a good track record of raising issues having to do with the African American community, so we're hoping that that will be lifted up. Mayor Pete has only a 4% support rate among black folks, which is dismal. And so we need to ask really tough questions about why he has failed to win the support of the black community.
Jordan, may I interject right now, please? This is Henry Davis. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so, yeah, it's abysmal and it's awful. So let me say this really quick. I don't believe the 4%. I don't know how you jump from 0% to 4% without doing anything to gain the support of African Americans. At that time, he was, still trying to figure out what the voters of South Carolina wanted, which I thought was okay when you campaign because that's what you're supposed to do. But then all of a sudden he gains a 4% jump automatically. So I don't believe those polls for 1 second. The second thing is that I've had a front row seat to Pete Buttigieg's leadership in his time in office, and it wasn't pretty. During the time that I was on council, there was a gap in his leadership as it relates to the police tape issue that has been unresolved and is still in court. I wrote a letter to the Department of Justice asking him to come in because of how nasty it was, and it's getting even worse. And at that time, the council as well had subpoenaed the tapes from the mayor, which is really unheard of. It was like one of those actions of Congress, when they moved to subpoena something from Trump's office. It was the same thing. And so we are still waiting on that subpoena to work for us, which it hasn't, because Pete has taken that particular item and has jammed it up in the court system. He went to the federal court, the state court, federal court. He went judge shopping. And when he did that, it just kept jamming up the process. And so now here we are 6 or 7 years later, still waiting for a result of, that subpoena. And also to see if those tapes can be played. $2 million plus have been spent on hiding the tapes. There has been a number of times that I've been in court because I was sued by the 4 officers for writing a letter to the Department of Justice. He used all of the tools that he could to block it. This morning, The Intercept, which is an online publication as well, did a story about the time when I asked for a resolution and an action of the council to ask a vendor that was supplying our police officers with their uniforms, and was asking them to stop selling a shirt called it was a shirt that said something about breathe easy, don't break the law. And that was in response to the Eric, and his name's eluding me right now. Eric, the guy out of Eric Gardner in New York. And, you know, it was just like really ugly. Now, this is a guy that is a police officer in Mishawaka, a neighboring community of South Bend, selling a T-shirt at his shop that South Bend uses for police supply. And he offers a shirt to the community after the man was killed in New York, saying, breathe easy, don't break the law. I thought that was the most insane and insensitive thing. Well, Pete's response was like of Trump's response with Charlottesville. When Charlottesville, those folks thought it was okay to get together, organize, and march. And so here we are again with this idea that he's naive or he doesn't know what, you got to get to know him. Well, we do know him because we are paying attention to his actions. Anytime something that comes up that's really strong and controversial as it relates to black people, he's naive. He doesn't understand it. He needs to figure it out. He needs to get educated. He doesn't get it. And he gets all of these passes. Meanwhile, you have all of these black people. We have all of these black people. We have all these black people that are being harmed by his leadership. And it's like it's being painted like it's okay, and it's not okay.
Watch your body posture. Okay, all right. Can everyone hear me? I don't know what happened with everyone.
No, I was finished. I'm sorry. I should have said I was done. Oh, I put you on mute. I'm sorry.
No, I really appreciate that. I know you've been really championing this issue since I was a teenager, so I really appreciate for being on the call. I did want to just remind folks that you can enter the queue to ask questions by pushing *1. And again, this is Jordan from Black Lives Matter South Bend. We hope to make moderators ask Mayor Pete Buttigieg about record or his record of racism and secrecy in the South Bend Police Department. And I also do want to remind folks, let you know if you don't know, that the former Director of Communications for South Bend Police Department, Karen DePate, gave a very jarring interview to a local black radio station, WUBS, here in South Bend. And she essentially, pointed out that, upon discovering the tapes, Mayor Pete never offered to meet with her about the tapes, and she received really what I read to be forms of intimidation from members of his campaign staff after his election in 2011. So there's a lot here to unpack, and I do want to give you all time to ask questions of our moderators while they're available. So let's now go to questions, and others can join the queue again by entering *1. I ask that all speakers to please say your name before answering to reporters so they know who you are. All right, so operator, can we have our first question, please?
And we will go ahead and take our first question today from Joshua Letterman with NBC News. Please go ahead.
Hey, thank you guys for doing the call. I was just curious, you were saying that that Buttigieg has been basically blaming people of color for not supporting him as opposed to sincerely and deeply addressing the national black community. And I'm wondering if you can outline some really specific things that he could do or that you'd like to see him do that so far he hasn't done. Because obviously he says that he is doing all those things. So if there are specific things that would demonstrate that type of a commitment that that you would like to see him do? Thanks.
Okay, now are you asking Melina to respond to that?
I think she was the one that sort of made that argument, but so that would be fine, or whoever else wants to handle it is fine.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Hi, this is Melina Abdullah. So one of the things that we really see as important in terms of engaging Black community is engaging Black community where you are. And so that means really deeply engaging with Black South Benders. South Bend, Indiana has a significant Black population that he has been in the leadership of. You know, it's a city he's been in the leadership of for 8 years. And so he should be engaging Black South Bend around, you know, where he fell short and what it is he can do better as he moves forward nationally. He can also pay attention to the issues that are most important to Black community and address those issues head on and be unafraid to address them in terms of race. So some of those issues would be questions of housing affordability and gentrification. I know that's been an issue locally in South Bend, but it's also an issue nationally. Police brutality continues to be at the top of the Black agenda, as well as police accountability. We haven't seen him speak, although it's embedded somewhere in his so-called Douglas plan. We haven't heard him speak strongly around the need for police accountability and a national police accountability framework. So we'd love for him to speak about that. We'd like him to speak directly to the need for him to win the Black vote. And he seems to be kind of riding on this idea that if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, or wins significant support in Iowa and New Hampshire, that it's meaningful. But we know, and there's a report out of the Brookings Institute about how the Black vote is much more important than Iowa and New Hampshire. And we've heard other candidates, Julian Castro and others, talk about the need for the Black vote rather than an over-reliance on early states. And so those are just some of the things. But again, breaking down major issues into racial terms and being unabashed in talking about racial justice would be a beginning for him.
May I interject here, please, as well? This is Henry Davis again.
Yeah, go ahead.
The question that was just posed, I get the question, and I understand. It's almost like one of those boilerplate questions when you want to ask somebody, well, what do you want them to do? And I don't take offense to it, but I have a problem with that type of question because we're almost building a narrative that Black people need something different than what white people need. Black people are people, they're humans just like white people are humans and are people. Or any other color or race that we want to qualify as a human. And what I have a problem with is that we have to show up with some sort of idea that we deserve businesses, investment in our communities, better police in our communities. We don't need to be living in poverty. We need schools that are well-resourced and with wraparound services in the neighborhood. We need affordable housing. And I think that that's what everyone needs and deserves that's an American citizen. And that's the problem. It's always turned over to, well, what do you Black people need then? No, it's not what Black people need. It's that I'm an American citizen and I deserve the same thing that my white counterparts have. And that's the problem. We live in it's over 40% poverty in South Bend, in Black America, or Black South Bend. It's 40% poverty or more. There's double-digit unemployment. And so then we turn the page, and the next thing people want to talk about is the level of crime that's in Black South Bend. Well, the crime has already happened, sir. When you are homeless, jobless, you don't own anything, the schools are not performing at a high level or under-resourced, what do you think is going to happen? Many of our residents live in food deserts. What do you think is going to happen? So the crime is already there. The people that are supposedly committing these crimes or are actively committing these crimes are only reacting to their environment. In their environment, it says, fend for yourself. And so I have a problem as an elected official, and I've been an elected official since I was 25, 26. I'm 40 now. I just turned 40. And somebody's going to ask me a question about how do we come up with a plan to ask Pete, can he do these things? He was the mayor of South Bend. That was his job. He was paid $100,000 or more each year to do this job. And somehow, some way, he shows up and says, well, I'm trying to do it. No, you don't want to do it, sir. How many chances do you get to show that you want to do something or you don't want to do something? I think 2 years is enough. Hell, we didn't spend 7 years at this point. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Could we move on to the? Is there another reporter?
And as a reminder, that is star and one for your questions. We'll now go to Erin Haynes with National Writer AP. Please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks so much for having this call. This is super helpful. I guess I'll try to ask it another way. Councilman Davis, I hope this question does not offend. I think what I hear you all saying, is that Mayor Buttigieg is more problematic as it pertains to black folks than the remaining three frontrunners, all of whom are white, and with the exception of Vice President Joe Biden, all of them are also struggling with black voters. So I think Councilman Davis kind of started to articulate this, but if the rest of you want to speak to this as well, I mean, is that because is the issue with Mayor Buttigieg because as mayor for the past 8 years, he has had a more direct relationship than any of the other candidates with the black community. I mean, Senator Sanders is a senator from a state that's obviously overwhelmingly white. Senator Warren is she's a U.S. senator, and then, Joe Biden was a former vice president to the first black president, which has earned him a lot of trust and name ID that seems to be translating, at least at this point, in the polls. But mayor is obviously a much more direct relationship to the community, and it sounds like he's had 8 years on the job to know better than he has, from what I hear Councilman Davis saying. Is that kind of where the rest of you are with your issue with him as well?
Yeah, this is Jordan. Yeah, I would say that is where my issue is with them. And he's had he's been the mayor. So as the mayor, you are the executive of the city of South Bend. Just as a person, a student who has really paid attention to how government works here in South Bend, I've seen how he's had access to millions of dollars in resources that he could have used to improve the conditions of African Americans. If you just go back and look at the city's purchasing report, the purchasing that the city, or the spending that the city did with African American businesses, I mean, it dropped precipitously under his tenure. So for him to say that he's this 21st century millennial mayor or presidential candidate who could best lead the nation and bridge the divide, I just don't see that when you further the divide throughout your tenure as mayor. So I guess, yes, that's where I'm coming from, is that he's had closer relationship, or could have had a closer relationship here with the black community, given the fact that he's a mayor. But yet he didn't really try to work with the community to address these issues. We only see now at the tail end of his second term that he is giving us some concessions, right? So he talks about a diversity and inclusion officer, which, in my opinion, that was an officer that was very underfunded. He talks about the minority business resource center on the west side of South Bend, but there was no money there for programming. It was just sort of like facade work, $30,000 for facade work. I mean, we just didn't really see a real commitment to the upliftment of black Americans or black folks here in South Bend until the very end of his second tenure, as he was looking to run for president.
And I just add that from a national frame, when you look at what's happening, Mayor Pete is at the very bottom of polling among black folks, right? So he's so I quoted the 4%, but if you look at Politico, he's at 3%. Black PAC, he's at 3%. So I think that speaks to Councilman Davis's critique of the poll that's being pushed out the hardest that gives them an extra percentage point. But that 3% ties with Mike Bloomberg, right, who has also had significant contact with black folks as mayor of New York City. And it was a contentious relationship between Bloomberg and black New Yorkers who, experienced stop and frisk under Bloomberg. So I think what we're seeing with Pete Buttigieg is a kind of interpretation of his leadership as really anti-black. So even someone like a Bernie Sanders, who's had very limited interaction as a senator from a state with virtually no black folks in it, he has a much higher percentage point among black Americans. So he's at, I believe, 14%, polling at 14% among black folks. Warren is at, I think, 11% among black folks. The difference that I see is that even Warren and Sanders, who you mentioned, both of them, have been willing to speak specifically to black issues. And although Councilman Davis is right that what's good for black America is good for all of America, I think we need to take it in that order, that a national leader needs to recognize that the best approach for this country is a lift from the bottom approach by addressing the needs, the specific needs of black people. You actually raise the standard for everyone, and that's something that you've seen Warren and Sanders and then people who are not on the stage like Castro and Booker be willing to do, while Mayor Pete and Bloomberg have actually done the opposite and engaged in full-on assaults against black folks in their own cities.
Oh, shit.
Hello?
Oh. I hung up by accident.
Fernando Malone, South Bend.
Could you introduce yourself to the audience for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Tell them what you thought of that.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Jamal Curtis Jones, investigative reporter from New York. I thought that call was very, very informative. Coming from New York, we hear a lot of just fluff stories about this Pete Buttigieg guy. It's like he's supposed to be the savior of the Democratic Party. He appeals a lot to people in my age group. That's millennials. He is the youngest candidate. But I would say that just coming here to South Bend and hearing it from the people themselves, and just understanding more about the relationship between him and his black constituents, it's really, it's pretty much corrupt, in my opinion. I think that he's done a lot to just worsen conditions for the city of South Bend, just in terms of economics, in terms of basically the relationship between the black community and the city at large. Just hearing just the Black Lives Matter, just understanding that he's had a lot of contention with the community that he hasn't been serving. And it's definitely opened my eye as a optimistic young millennial who is not from South Bend, but has heard a lot about Pete Buttigieg and what he stands for. So, just a complete eye opener, and I hope that more gets out there, so the national conversation about Pete Buttigieg as a candidate skews towards more his qualifications based on his past with the city of South Bend, because I don't think that has been highlighted enough. Think about all these people who we just heard about on this call and compare that to, I guess, the coverage that you would see on the news. It's almost night and day. You wouldn't get this unless you were actually asking people who served under Pete Buttigieg. And 8 years is a very long time to fix a lot of problems, or at least to get the ball rolling on a lot of problems that you've been hired to find solutions for. So, I agree. with a lot of the people who were on call that Pete Buttigieg has not done an adequate service for the city of South Bend, and that he probably shouldn't be running for president. He's not an adequate candidate based on his track record of 8 years as mayor of South Bend. And hopefully, as we go into the debates and as we go more into the 2020 election, that will be highlighted, not just for him, but for all the candidates, and for them to understand that, yes, the black vote is very important. Black people definitely do have a say in the future of this country. And if we're basically tired of all the fluff and all the lies and just all the ignorance surrounding our issues, the issues that matter to us the most, everything from economics to police brutality to, just poor schooling. Enough's enough. So I think that, in my personal opinion, Bernie Sanders is a candidate for that, but we'll see as the campaign goes on. So those are my 2 cents.
So the full behind the scenes. Status Coup, as you know, is kind of majorly under-resourced. So it's not like I have like a producer or like someone to help me book guests. So literally during the call, which I had my phone so you could hear the call, I'm getting text messages because I'm communicating with different residents here to try to line up interviews for the rest of today and then today. So a resident called me while they were doing questions on the Black Lives Matter call, and instead of pressing ignore, I hung up on the Black Lives Matter call by accident. So, accident, unintentional on my part, but timing-wise, it works out anyway because we have to run to do this other interview. Let me tell you about what this other interview is going to be about. I think we're going to do it live. You might not get a notification because YouTube doesn't want to notify people. So we'll probably be live in the next half hour, just so you know, to come back. I have a lot of thoughts about that call, but I don't have the time to get into them right now because I have to go to another interview. So real quick, I want to remind you folks that last night, we had just finished an interview when I got a call or a text I got during the interview that the South Bend Police Department, which on that Black Lives Matter call, you just heard a whole lot about the South Bend Police Department. I got a call that the South Bend Police Department had made an arrest of a black male. And during the arrest, the black male actually had kept his phone running. He was live streaming it on Facebook. The police department thought they had turned the phone off. They flipped the phone around so the screen was black, but it actually didn't end the live stream, so the audio was running. So the arrest keeps going forward, and at the end, in about the last minute, and this story is up on our website. The website strangely went down right after we published it. I won't get into it, but we think something nefarious happened. We're looking into it. Anyway, the story is back up. So if you go to statuscoup.com, it's back up. If you go to our Twitter @statuscoup, which you should follow, it's the first story up there. It's pinned at the top. In the final minute of the arrest, you have officers that, we're not from here. The screen was black, so we can't identify their names, who they were. Basically reenacting a scene from the film Django Unchained. That was a film with Jamie Foxx as a freed slave. Quentin Tarantino, it was a bloodbath. Quentin Tarantino is famous for these shootouts and blood. And they were reenacting a scene where hooded Klan members of the KKK were marching to lynch Jamie Foxx's character Django, and basically bickering amongst themselves because the hoods that one of their wives made didn't fit. Literally, you hear these officers on tape reenacting that. So, unfortunately, when you have a story like that, you got to break it. You can't wait because somebody else could get it. So we broke it probably right around the time the House passed impeachment. So it kind of just didn't get a lot of attention. But I found the police report, and it was the South Bend Police Department who arrested him. It was the South Bend Police Department in there. The police chief was telling activists that there were other agencies there, kind of, I think, trying to deflect attention away from South Bend, trying to muddy the waters to make it unknowable if the people on the tape were actually South Bend police officers. From everything I could see and the witnesses who were there who told me that they only saw South Bend police cruisers, from the police report that I looked at that showed the arresting officer was a South Bend police officer, the arresting agency was South Bend Police, this was South Bend Police. And sure, Mayor Pete Buttigieg didn't make the comments, but this is his police department. And for Status Coup members, so sign up as a member, you can actually find out about an insane conversation. Jen, if you're in the super chat, you could allude to what members will find out and hear. I was pitching the story this morning all around. I sent it to BuzzFeed, Daily Beast, New York Times, Washington Post. One of the outlets I sent it to, I'm not going to tell everything because I did a video just for the members, statuscoup.com/join, become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. That's how we fund this reporting. An editor literally told me, oh, so you think the mayor should be held accountable for some random comments officers make? This is what an editor at a national news site said to me. Do you think the mayor should be held accountable for the comments his police make? I'm going to leave it at that. Become a member to find out more. We actually post the screenshots because it was on Twitter. We blurred out his identity. I don't want to dox the person, but so you could see. So you have a window into how terrible the media is. You also heard how terrible the media is. Did you hear any reporter on that call asking one question about South Bend? It was all about the campaign. All about, well, what can Pete do to get black voters? Nothing about South Bend. You also had a reporter from the Associated Press, the Standard, saying, oh, all other candidates are struggling among black people. Does she not read polls? I'm not saying this is a Bernie bro. A new poll just came out that Bernie Sanders has closed the gap in South Carolina within 7 points. 7 points for Bernie Sanders in South Carolina is like basically the equivalent of a tie in Iowa. If Bernie Sanders only loses South Carolina by 5 to 7 points, that is a victory. He lost South Carolina in 2016, I think, by 25 to 30 points. This is why we need a status coup. We have reporters who literally don't care that Pete Buttigieg, the candidate that they have created to be the front runner in Iowa, according to the polls, average of the polls, he's leading in Iowa right now. They don't care that his police department is literally reenacting a Klan scene from a movie. Now, I reached out to Pete Buttigieg's campaign. I reached out to his city office. So I reached out to National, his campaign. Reached out to his spokesperson in the city. Reached out to the South Bend Police Department. Crickets. And I don't want to make this into Watergate. Of course, we're in Indiana. There's racist police. There's racist people. But he's the front runner in Iowa. Can you imagine if Bernie Sanders was the mayor of Burlington still and front runner of Iowa, and his police made racist comments during an arrest? They would be not only telling him to drop out of the race, they'd be calling him on to resign as mayor. So it's just unbelievable to me. Obviously, there is just, I think what we're getting at here, what we're fighting is not only systemic racism, systemic economic terrorism. I don't call it gentrification. It's economic terrorism. But what you're also fighting is there is a wall in America, but it's not Trump's wall. It's a wall that these PR, public relations people, have literally created, because these PR people are the journalists. The journalists are the public relations people. They are walling off the truth from you. I guarantee you the majority of people watching right now didn't know the majority of what they just said on that call. And credit where credit is due. You know how I feel about the Young Turks, but my former colleague Jonathan Larson has done some good reporting. He's been on South Bend and on Pete Buttigieg quite often. So he was on that call relaying his reporting. you know, I've just come into this a little late because Jen and I have been working on a separate story that is publishing in January. A lot of you keep asking. We're at the mercy of the outlet we're writing it for, but we believe it's coming out in January. But what was amazing to me, and we have to go to do this other interview, to me the biggest takeaway from that call, besides the reporters being terrible, was when, I apologize, I don't know if you know her name, the female speaker, when she said, it's not enough just to get rid of the visceral, horrendous racism of Donald Trump, because there's another kind of racism. And that's the liberal, I don't know how she phrased it, but the neoliberal, I'm paraphrasing, the neoliberal racism. It's not as vitriolic verbally. It's not written in tweets. The N-word isn't said. It's just a quiet racism of not caring about black people. And I think Henry Davis, who I'm interviewing tomorrow, Jen set it up, so awesome. Look forward to that. I think he said it best. Why are you asking about what he has to do to get black people? Black people are not special creatures or aliens. They're no different than white people. They have different needs because of the racism. But black people need jobs. Black people need health care. Black people need love. Black people need heat, electricity, no different than white people. So to me, that call was so illuminating. I wish we could have done it better as far as production, but you know, we're the little engine that could. We are being suppressed heavily on YouTube, so we really appreciate your super chats. Jen also set up a fundraising page just for this trip. We're trying to grow our membership, but since we're being so suppressed, you know, it's very hard because to grow our membership, we have to expand the audience, but to expand the audience, we have to stop being suppressed. So it's a work in progress. We're trying to grow our membership, but in the meantime, we'd love to at least put a dent in the costs for this trip, which are many. Rent a car, food, food, hotel, flight, Jamal. And by the way, I didn't do a proper introduction, but Jamal is from New York. He's, I don't know how old you are, but young dude, happens to be black. Doesn't matter, but that's obviously you can see that. And we're, you know, just trying him out. So far, so good. And aren't you from Jamaica originally?
Born and raised in New York City.
Oh, no, you just went to Jamaica. Sorry. But yeah, he's doing a great job, and you'll be seeing more of him as we go. So I have to go run to another interview. I believe we're going to go live. The interview that I'm going to, by the way, and that's why I accidentally hung up on Black Lives Matter call. I was going to ask them a question. So the black man that was arrested last night who live streamed the call, he's still in jail. I spoke with his mother last night. His mother is very distressed, so we're going to speak with her spokesperson, I guess a friend of the family who knows what happened about the arrest, so you could see what's really going on here in South Bend for black people. The blatant racism that was on display. Go read the story, retweet the tweet. Retweet our tweet. It's at the top of Status Coup's Twitter, at Status Coup. So we're going to interview him. Then we're going to be doing some other reporting. I believe we're still working it out. There might be a local Pete debate watch party that we want to go to. I don't know if they're going to like us, but I think we want to go to a debate watch party. So we got a lot going on. We got interviews scheduled for tomorrow. Definitely. If you can pitch in a few bucks, Jen's putting the donate link in the super chat. If you're not a member, we're showing you what we're going to do. We're not just telling you what we're going to do. We're showing you we're here. We're reporting. We're doing investigative reporting. Literally, it took me less than a day to break this call, this racist arrest. I wouldn't have broke it if I wasn't here. The source that sent it to me, I got because I was here. So, and we're also trying to schedule more interviews with Black Lives Matter leaders. So with that, I bid you adieu. And remember, sign up for our email list, too. If you're not on our email list, you might miss when we're live, this kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm missing anything else. I don't think I'm missing anything else. So, we just got a new patron, so thank you. And we're going to be posting more behind-the-scenes content just for members. Patrons get it, too. So if you want to see, like, even more behind-the-scenes than us, very poorly produced, airing a phone call, become a member, statuscoup.com/join. $5 to $10 a month, you can become a member. For those that don't have it, we totally get it. We don't want to make your situation worse, but maybe you spend $5 a day on coffee or a week on something. I think independent journalism is better suited, especially since you're seeing more and more what the corporate media is really like. So thank you for watching. We're going to be live again, I believe, in a half hour, so stick with us.